Okay, Danny. So you know my name. My name is Francisca Benitez. I'm originally from Chile. I was born and raised there. I was born in 1974, which was already in dictatorship. And I've been living half my life here in the United States, in New York, in particularly. So I moved here when I was 23 years old, and that was 1998. That's when I arrived here. And through these 22 years that I've been in New York, I have become an American citizen. So now I am a dual citizen. Um, and I just want to clarify that I don't live in Chile.
Right.
I've been 22 years living here. I pay taxes in the United States. I vote here.
But you were still able to vote in the referendum, right?
That's right, because we've been fighting for it, and the Chileans abroad have been voting since the last presidential election. So it's fairly recent.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, that's one thing. So uh, the first thing I wanted to say about Chile is that this uprising that we saw exploding on October 18, it didn't happen just out of thin air. You know, it was something in the works for a long time. So that's one thing. But it was different this time because of the magnitude of the uprising, the magnitude of the voices in the streets, where it was just so big that the government could not ignore them. I mean, they tried to fight them, sending all the military, the cops, the whole toque de queda, the curfew, in full force, but it didn't quell it.
And really, up until the date of the referendum, there was still like protests, and there was still a lot of police violence, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But also it was sort of quelled by the COVID. That was the only thing that was able to sort of quiet it down a little bit. But as soon as the good weather started coming up again, people were back in the streets. So it's a long process. If we go back, for example, when I went to university in the early 90s, I was in the Universidad de Chile, which is our national state university, that back in the days, in the 60s, it used to be a free university, like CUNY here. And then after the dictatorship, when we had this new constitution that establishes that education is not a responsibility of the government, but it's could be a business, you know, put in the free market. Even the University of Chile started charging tuition, and the model kind of changed. And if you look back, a lot of even our presidents, a lot of senators studied for free in the 60s in the Universidad de Chile. When in the beginning of the 90s, when I went to university, that was actually the same moment where the dictatorship ended. So I remember when I was in school, we were demanding the same thing that the students are demanding now. But our tactics were to take over the school and do a protest in the school, right? Right now, the students didn't just confine it to do a protest in their school, you know?
Right.
They did massive mobilizations in the streets. And I wanted to say that, for example, October 18th, when the students refuse to this call for that the government, I'm sorry, basically on the end of October 2019, the government announced that the price of public transportation was going to go up 30 cents.
Right. And this is what's kind of started the whole
that was
thing.
the drop
or like
of water that
exploded it.
overflowed. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when that happened, the students said, we're not taking this. And they said, we're going to jump the turnstiles, and we're calling the whole country to join us and turn the turnstiles. This is very important, that the country went with them and supported them. One, because everybody agrees. I mean, a lot of people agrees with that, of course, but also because on 2006, since 2006, the students were revolting. So it wasn't just one day everybody decided to follow the students. They were already behind two giant students' uprisings, you know? The one of 2006 first, that was the big, huge uprising that one took the whole adult world by surprise. Because in 2006, just try to remember where we were in terms of digital communication. This is prior to social media. In that moment, all the little kids, and I'm talking little kids, high school students and really young university students, they prepared a national uprising online without the supervision of knowledge of the adults. And in 2006, they just pulled up this gigantic uprising in all major cities in the country at the same time. So that was like a first like, wow. And that was called the Revolución Pingüina, the Penguin Revolution. Why they call it like that? Because all the little kids with the uniforms, they look like penguins. So that's why it's called the Penguin Revolution. And from that moment, there was this conscious shift, you know, people were like, the kids are right. They're right, you know. So then in 2011, there was again bigger. And in that case, it didn't remain as a student revolution. In that second one, the student leaders were elected to Congress. So that's the second step. And now we have this third moment, revolutionary moment, again, put forward by the kids. And this time, we not only get people in Congress,
the whole country caught fire.
Exactly. And the whole country is sort of coalescing into kind of like the same demands, you know, which is we want health education. We want a government that deals with this and doesn't just send it to be taken care of by the free market, you know. And especially also the another really big demand is the respects for our environment, for Earth, and the end of all these extractivist economies that happen in the most vulnerable areas.
Would you say that this is a project of the left in Chile, or do you think it's broader than the left? Like, you know, like has this been a demand amongst activists and like lefty sort of academics in Chile for a long time, or that has finally come to like the national forefront, or is this more of like a coalition of different parts of the political spectrum there?
I don't know, if you look at the work of Luis Emilio Recabarren, for example, which was the founder of the Chilean Communist Party, which first was born as the Socialist Worker Party, and then it mutated in the 20s into the Chilean Communist Party. Everything is spelled there. I mean, it's already there, right? That's the thinking. Maybe a lot of people don't know it, you know, they don't make the connection. They're like, I'm apolitical, I have no idea about this, and that's to all the politicians from the left and the right, but I would like to
healthcare.
I like healthcare and all that, you know, so.
Okay. Yeah, I guess like, is it perceived in Chile as a leftist, as a victory for the left in Chile, or is it, I mean, it had huge, overwhelming support, right? So I would imagine that, yes, in practice, the support for it is broader, but I'm just wondering how it's perceived in terms of like a political project.
I think it's perceived more as the street speaking.
The street,
loud.
okay.
Yes.
Can we rewind to how the current constitution sort of came to be, under what conditions, and also if you could talk about the Pinochet dictatorship a little bit, and what life was sort of like day to day under the Pinochet dictatorship.
Let's start like a bigger like overview. The oligarchy is always trying to keep people uneducated and working for them, hopefully for nothing. That's kind of like just a general thing that has been happening for a long time. In the 60s, Chile started to have more progressive. I mean, there's a long leftist tradition in Chile, you know, but it's been hard. In the 60s, this social process, I mean, progress started to take in more of a hold, and there was big literacy projects, and then the agrarian reform, which was it was impulsed by a Christian Democrat, you know, more like a center, but it was started, and that had a big effect, a really profound effect in Chile, because through that process, it was like the first decision to tackle the colonialist model of land tenure. You know, you had this big haciendas, and this was like the first like systemic try to sort of chop it off and produce a little bit more an egalitarian relationship between the inhabitation and cultivation of the land. And so that was one thing. Then all this process with Allende was accelerated. Okay, the nationalization of industries was accelerated. So it was happening already in Frei in the 60s, and then accelerated with Allende. And then, of course, came the coup, which was orchestrated by the Chilean right with a lot of help from the US government, because this thing of like people freely electing a socialist government was like very dangerous for the United States. You couldn't have that in your backyard. So they tried to just boycott it and try little by little, but then it was just over. Let's help them just take it down, right? So that's what happened. The coup happened. And it was really, really massive, because it wasn't just this violent overthrow of the government, but then it was just this engineering to control thought. Like, for example, one of the first decisions of the government is like to like take all the deans of the university and put military men in place, the complete control of the press and of the television. So I personally, I mean, so if you had parents, if you were communist, any lefty-leaning person was a dangerous to society and had to be eliminated. That was the thought of the military regime, you know. So it doesn't matter if you're a student leader, a union worker, or if you just like to listen to the songs of Violeta Parra. Those were all things that put you in suspicion. Like the spectrum was huge, you know. So like it's just the reign of terror. You could like anybody was like remotely lefty was considered danger, and the strategy was a lot to take people, torture them to like really, 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 really like incredible, horrible levels, and then send them back to their communities. So to spread the fear like that. So, I mean, you can really analyze there the amount of deaths and the amount of tortured people then released back into the community. So it was just really a reign of terror. And at the same time, this narrative of progress, of free market. So basically you had completely free reign to do whatever you want in business, but not free reign to think about anything. So people tried to continue living under these conditions, you know? A lot of people went into exile. I grew up, for example, in a fairly conservative area, south of Santiago, in the Maule region. And I grew up in a pretty privileged environment. I went to a private school, not because we were rich, but because my mother was a teacher in that school. So we were sort of, the students of teachers could go for free. But I really can see the inequality of the private education and the public education. It's just, it's incomparable. Right? So, my memories of growing up was a very facade, a controlled environment where I remember as a kid, I perceived that that was our president, everything was fine, you know. And my parents did what a lot of parents did, which actually uh, not mention this thing, try to like not bring it up. I mean, there's many different households dealt with it different. That was
Yeah.
how the things were dealt in my house. But that was my immediate family. My bigger family had more different political opinions, and I started to kind of like piece out what was reality through their perspectives. And then for me, the moment that really marked a difference for me was in 1985, which was the first time I did a trip abroad. And I was in a foreign country. I was 10 years old, watching the news from Chile. And I was crying. I was terrified. There's a war in my country. What's going on? Things I had no idea in my country, you know. But I was shocked for the first time to see what was going on.
How did the Pinochet dictatorship end? And also,
Mhm.
at what point does the constitution that is currently about to be scrapped, where is that in sort of
Okay.
the timeline?
Okay, so there was throughout this really horrible dictatorship, really oppressive, there was a resistance. Artists doing work, the whole like Chileans abroad organizing. There was just a lot of resistance, and thanks to that, that pressure, um, we ended the dictatorship. Now, the narrative of the right is that they ended it. This dictatorship was kind of like instrumental, and they ended it, and it never like what. It was never about going indefinitely in dictatorship. It was all about the institutionality, and that's the narrative of the right. But what happened is that all the right-wing parties helped the dictatorship. Of course, they were their ministers then, and they crafted the constitution. And it was, we can actually point it all to Guzman, Jaime Guzman, which was is an extreme right guy from the UDI, Unión Demócrata Independiente, the most to the extreme right party in Chile. He was an Opus Dei member, not only an Opus Dei member, but a numerario, which means those people who are like civilian monks, you know.
Yeah.
They're like, they just do a life, but they have made their vows to the Opus Dei as a monk. They're celibate. They it's like an Opus Dei monk, but like it walks around as a civilian.
Wow.
Okay, that's a very important point to make. So Jaime Guzman basically, and then with all this ideology of the Chicago Boys, crafted this constitution with all the military in power, and then asked the country, okay, come vote to this constitution. And basically there was a trap there in the constitution itself, because it's basically telling the country, okay, in this constitution, it says that the dictatorship will be over in 8 years and you will be back to democracy. So come and vote for it. So it was like put in a trap, because people are like, we want to go back to democracy, but we're going to end up with this deal, you know? So, so okay, this was 1980 when it was ratified by this national plebiscite in the middle of dictatorship. People like going to vote like with the military in power. What kind of freedom is that?
Right.
So basically, that's the idea of Jaime Guzman, you know, of this extreme conservatism, and at the same time, this laissez-faire economically, and the state relinquishing its responsibilities in all the aspects that, according to Guzman, can be taken on by civil society, you know? So the results have been the inequality has jumped and jumped and jumped and jumped to obscene levels. And basically, right now in Chile, all the wealth is in 8 families, which is the oligarchy. Like, it's all the families that have been presidents back in the days, and all the conservative senators back in the day. And now I think of that constitution, just, I mean, we could talk forever about this.
Oh,
But
yeah. Keep
but
going.
another thing is like, think about also when we came back to democracy on 89. Yes, we came back to democracy, but the dictator was still the head of the armed forces. And in the Constitution, it was written that we're going to inherit some designated senators. And the dictator was one of those designated senators.
Wow.
I mean,
Okay. So,
so it's
he
been,
joined the Senate after he. Wow, that's
that's
nuts.
right. That's right. So it's been, and the whole Constitution itself had all these like safeguards in place. So it will be very difficult to modify it. So we've been trying to modify it. For example, abortion law. In 1925 Constitution, we did have an abortion law. The 1980 Constitution bans it completely. In every case, it doesn't matter if you're 12 years old, raped, and you're expecting that baby, you have that baby. That was the Pinochet Constitution. And through a huge process, 2 presidents of Bachelet, it took us, of a woman socialist president, to get out of that and now have the still unacceptable as abortion law that now in Chile you can abort if you've been raped, if it's an incest, or if the health of the baby or the fetus is in danger. Those are the only conditions that you can abort. So there's just so much. And then you have the Constitutional Tribunal, which is another trick that vetoes things that the Senate tries to change. I mean, basically we inherit this thing that it's like, it's camisa de fuerza, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
they really they try to lock this thing in
It
place.
seems like they try to preserve as much of the institutional power that they had but try to dress it up in the facade of having elections and having like a normal democratic process. That's what it seems like.
Exactly. It was kind of like also the quorums and all how the percentages work ended up having the sistema binominal, which at the end you just have 2 parties, and the system, the drawing of it tries to push up this party that really is not that many people, just like the math of the electoral college here, you know.
Correct. Yeah.
It's an artificially created minority majority, you know.
Yeah, no, they're
anti-majoritarian
mechanisms inside of these documents.
Exactly.
And you know, it's interesting that I think in the US, just because our Constitution happens to be 230 something years old, there seems to be a resistance here to examining it in the same sort of really critical light. I mean, you know, it happens. It's not that people don't talk about the things in our Constitution, but I would say that, like, in the popular conception of the US Constitution, it is held up as like this very sacred thing. And it's very interesting to me, and I do wonder if, like, the recency of the ratification of the current Chilean Constitution in the 80s helps to, and the fact that, you know, also it was like drafted under a dictatorship probably also helps to delegitimize it a little bit, to the extent that, like, more than 70% of the population would vote to just redo it from the ground up.
78%.
78%.
To be
That's
precise.
wild. Can you talk to me about the 20-something% that would have voted no? Like, what was their argument? What was their perspective? What was, you know, were they just like really right-wing people, or was there more of a spread of opinion there? Do you know? I mean, was it like an explicitly right-wing objection to it, or was it? I'm just trying to understand it in terms of, like, political forces at play here, right? And what that means.
at this point, I think it was really the oligarchy speaking in that 20%. If you look at the map, I mean, it's a pitchforks moment, really. It's like you look at the map and the whole country, like voted or leaned for the apruebo. And there's one little red spot, which is like the size of Brooklyn. And that's where all the rich people live. And that's the only place in the whole country. So they've been
that tells you everything
they've been exposed, like almost like you're like, oh my God, there comes the pitchforks now, because it's just so identifiable where they are. It's so little also, such a little place.
So yeah, it was like people protecting their class interests for the most part.
And they benefited, you know, I mean,
yeah, of course.
For example, just let's think about like the Mapuche lands and all that conflict there. The Mapuches have this conception that their home is the land, the whole inhabitation there, and they're the caretakers of the land, you know. So they don't overproduce. A lot of their diet comes from recollection of natural things, like the piñones from the Araucaria are a very like important part of their diet. I mean, so this is their conception of the world, and you have a government policy to subsidize cutting all the like planting forests that are non-indigenous and actually destroy the land and take all the water.
Wow.
I mean, this is government impulsed things.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is any crime committed by a Mapuche is always like thought of as a political crime. Therefore, they apply to them the terrorist law. And it's kind of like a parallel justice system, like where there's no witnesses, it's all whatever the cop decide to say in his report. It's just mind-blowing, you know, the lack of respect, the just outright abuse. And that's why also, I mean, you see more and more Chileans being conscious of the situation. And that's why in the protests, you see like, back in the days, probably it's all like Chilean flags, but now is just as many flags of Chile as of all the other indigenous communities there. Mapuches, the Cahuéscars, the Aymaras. And now there's, again, this moment, this critical moment that we need to refound ourselves as a society. Right. And there's this push of like, we are a plurinational entity, you know.
So let's talk about the future now, and it's very interesting for me to account for it's seemingly almost 80% of a country to be ready and willing to sort of open up this door, right, to basically, as you say, reforge, right, make a completely new country. And a new culture, possibly, right? Like it just seems like there's a lot of possibility spilling out of this moment. So what are your sort of like, what's your biggest dream to come out of this situation? And then what do you think is actually will be, and hopefully it's close to what your dream is, but what do you think the some likely like results of this will be? And not just with the Constitution, but how this kind of spills out in other places.
I really hope that this moment of empowerment translates into a sustained participation. That's I really hope, because I see a lot of people that complain a lot. It's like, fuck all the political parties. You guys have committed treason against us, the people, over and over and over again, and everybody, there's like this like completely delegitimization of the political representation, right? But I'm really happy with that. But show up to your assembly meeting. You know, right. The problem is that everybody complains, but nobody wants to show up. You know, very few wants to show up. So what's exciting is that in these revolutions that people have show up, but I think we need to continue showing up and participating a lot, you know, and forever. Because basically that's what it comes down to. So we have to figure out ways of participating.
There were two pieces, right? There was yes to the Constitution, and then also, again, super interesting, how it was going to happen, right? Whether
Exactly.
people from the current Congress were going to be part of it, or whether you guys were going to elect a constitutional.
Yeah, and the funny thing is
body.
that second question got even more percentage. It was like 80%. The other one was 78%, and this was 80% that we don't want any politician involved, right? So I'm a little concerned now how this is going to happen, this new process, because there's a lot of caudillismo, or like this just personalized thing, and also culture of celebrity, and that it's very dangerous, So who are going to be these 155 people that we're going to choose to sit and draft this? And to me, what's also very important is how this process is going to be, because as one of the people, I'm one of the 200,000 Chileans that participated in the 2016 constitutional consultation that we did. Because as I said, this is a process that's been going for a long time. There's been a push to change the constitution for a long time. And in a couple of elections before, there was a big national call for people to mark in the little corner of their vote, when they were voting in the last presidential election, to vote in the little corner, write AC, meaning Constitutional Assembly. So Bachelet in 2016, she saw this urgency, and her government tried to put forward a process of national consultation to move into that direction, to move institutionally as a government, to move in the direction of participation. And they launched this pretty serious effort to ask the citizens what do they think should be our foundational document, right? So basically, what I value from that moment was that in that moment, the process, the method that was put forward was not representation, delegated representation. Like, I choose that person to go speak for me. The whole thing was made online with your national social security number. You could enter and you could participate in the drafting of the Constitution as an individual, as a collective, autoconvocada, una asamblea autoconvocada.
Self-organized, yeah.
Self-organized group.
Wow.
Or as a cabildo, which was more like a group with help from the government for the sort of facilitation. So you had these three instances. 90,000 people participated as individual. Let me see how many. And let me see you. Well, and here, there were 105 people, 105,000 participated in the self-called organized groups.
Mm-hmm.
And then 12,000 in the cabildos provinciales, and 8,000 and something cabildos regionales. And if you look at the results of that, it's really interesting and telling what came out of that consultation, And it's really interesting that when the next president came to office, Piñera, you couldn't even find the results of that consultation anymore. The website where we used to be able to download the results vanished. So, but I bring it up because now that we decided we're going to do it, the question of how we're going to do it is very important.
The current president is a conservative, right? He's a member of the Conservative Party, or
absolutely.
Is that right?
He's part of the right.
He's a billionaire, right?
He's one of the biggest billionaires in Chile.
Yeah.
He's one of the biggest billionaires. He was part of the government of Pinochet. He was also a functionary of the government of Pinochet. So, yeah. But he's up to re-election next year. I'm sorry, not re-election, because in Chile we don't have re-election possibilities. It's 4 years, you're out.
And then
4 years, you're out.
Oh, okay.
4 years,
interesting.
Which I think it's schizophrenic.
Yeah, it's a little chaotic, probably. Yeah, yeah.
And this is what, if you stick the election, the last 16 years in Chile, is schizophrenic because it was since
swings one way and then
and the same person. I mean, Bachelet was ended her government with like 80% approval rating.
Mm.
Can you believe that? And she couldn't be reelected. So
Mm.
and she was so like at that point loved that the left couldn't bring another candidate as loved as her. And what happened? The right wing won, Piñera won. And then after Piñera, everybody went to Bachelet. She came back to office. And then after her, Piñera came
Oh my
back.
God.
Schizophrenic. It's schizophrenic.
Oh, so the same people run just the 4 years and it just, wow, that's nuts.
And of course, anything that she can do is undone by the other guys.
Undone, right.
Like,
right. And probably the other way around too,
it's
right?
Just
like,
ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So so we've been in this dance between Bachelet and Piñera. And so now we're facing making a new constitution, getting rid of this Piñera that of course I think we're gonna get rid of him. And I really hope that Daniel Jadwe accepts the calls from the people to become our president. Because I think he's an exemplary person that really understands what we're talking about. And it's a person that really has a vocation of public service. I mean, Piñera has a vocation to be a millionaire. That's
right.
Business is first in his mind. We need a person whose first interest in life is public service. That's number one. I mean, you can't have a president that is interested in business. Come on. Business don't need help. That's that they have freedom and ideas to do their thing, you know?
Right.
Business don't need help. So I really hope that he accepts the nomination that I'm already hearing in the streets. Because what he's been doing is really interesting. Because he is, okay, so Daniel Jadwe, I'm just going to tell you where I know him
great.
from. Mm-hmm. Daniel Jadwe was in my university. I was studying architecture in the 90s in Chile, La Universidad de Chile, and he was also studying architecture when I was in the entering university when he was like at the end, okay? And in our student movement, he was one of our student leaders. And I can tell you from, 28 years ago already, that this guy since that day already was completely committed and clear, very clear what public service is, what we need to do to create a better society. I mean, at that level. And ever since, he's only proven that. So he's a member of the Communist Party. He's a Palestinian Chilean.
Wow.
And he was elected mayor of Recoleta, which is a borough of Santiago. And for a long time, it had right-wing mayors that were just like stealing the money. I mean, a disaster. So here comes Jadwe, and he's also with an emphasis on participation, you know, in supporting communities, you know, to be in direct contact with everybody that makes the community, you know. And so he started to basically try to run this borough with his ideas, aside from whatever is doing Chile with his right-wing government. So it's like a little maquette, it's a little mini of what could happen in whole Chile. And also why I think he's very interesting is not that he's a guy with like really strong ideals. He's a good administrator as well, you know. So that's something
that's important. That's a super important. I think actually the left doesn't think about enough. Like, great, you're charismatic, you have good ideas, but are you a good administrator? Can you actually navigate the bureaucracy and navigate through all of that stuff to actually get things done? Yeah,
exactly. So Daniel Jadwe is an architect and a sociologist. And he has worked as an architect. He has done urban development. So he has a lot of understanding of those things. And so he has impulsed a lot of things in this control environment, which is the borough of Recoleta, you know? So it's been very interesting for all Chile to see this. And what is happening is that a lot of communes or boroughs in Chile, like municipalities, are starting to emulate that. So it's very interesting that it's kind of like, this is happening at small level,
Mm.
as a resistance and as an example of the alternative. And it's very real, graspable, is right there. It's called Universidad Abierta. He started a university that is free. And this university happens in the evenings where the high schools are closed, happens this open university where you can like learn from astronomy to anything. And he gathered all the most brilliant minds teaching in this university. Also, he bypassed all the expensive cost of medicines by creating the popular pharmacy, which is like sponsored by the municipality and totally like bypasses the free market in the pharmaceutical industry. He buys directly. And the same thing with La Óptica Popular, La Farmacia. He's the one who started the Inmobiliaria Popular, making public housing. So there's people can see actually this environment where this alternative it's being created, you know. So I mean, a lot of people said like, oh, Chileans are never gonna elect a communist, you know. But I really hope that people.
Seems like if there was ever a time that would happen, it would be now.
Yeah.
Right, because it's such a moment of unprecedented, like, you know.
Yeah, and at this point, it's like it's so empty that it's like almost like El Cuco, you know. It's like, come on, just look at what's going on. Okay, move the label. Okay, move the label a little bit and look at what's going on.
Very similar to what's happened here, right? Where it's sort of like reality has weakened the Red Scare sort of like anti-socialist, anti-communist ideology that's been part of American thought, American academia, American culture for, I don't know, 60, 70 years now, right? And you see that, especially among young people, it's no longer a scary word, right? And and people are open to things that you know as well as I do, that 5 years ago, 10 years ago were seen as complete fringe impossibilities. I think worldwide there's this, you know, the economic reality that we all live in has caused this reevaluation of ideas that I think is really good, and it's like one of the few things that gives me a little bit of hope these days, right? Outside of like Chile and Bolivia. How long is this slated to take? Is there a timeline?
I think the way because just to tell you how it happened. Yeah. Basically, the uprising was so big and it wasn't going down. It was for a month, like people in the street fighting with the cops, that there was this mesa de diálogo created with all the political parties sat down and they created this acuerdo de la paz social, acuerdo por la paz social, that a lot of people wasn't happy with, but created this process, this acuerdo of doing the plebiscite and then moving to create this new constitution if everybody voted for it, right? So that process was, now we passed the first step, then comes to create it, and hopefully in 2022 we would have a new constitution. That is the timeline.
Okay.
That was put forward.
2022. Okay.
Yes. And next year, 2021, at the end of 2021, is the presidential election. So yeah, I really hope that we would end up in a constitution under a Daniel Jadwe government and not something else.
Yeah. Okay, so just to sort of try to put a little bit of a bow on the conversation, what, to me, you know, a lot of it was funny when you were describing things in under the current constitution, like some of the anti-majoritarian mechanisms in there, you know, it did remind me of the fact that our constitution has a lot of these things too, right? That cement minority rule, and increasingly the minority here is increasingly insanely right wing, right? And it seems like they're going to do whatever they can to keep hold of power. And there are some real constitutional they have support in the Constitution, right? That's what it's built for. So what advice, or now that you're, you're Chilean and American, like how does this translate into your life in America and into American politics? And do you see that there's a lesson that we can learn here as Americans too from what happened there?
There's one thing that could be done really quick in the US, and that I think is really fundamental to me. To me, there is a beauty in the democratic system, the election, that it's this system by which you can put together the individual and the collective. And there's this beautiful moment, which is called the individual vote, in which you, as an individual, as a person, irreplaceable, unique in the world, you express your voice, and that voice counts in this big election, right? Right now in the US, that is not happening. It's not one voice, one vote. It's not happening. And that to me is like the fundamental thing by which we here in America cannot be called a democracy. Yeah. Because a country where, like, in the last 2 Republican presidents didn't win the popular vote, they just didn't win. To me, they didn't win. Totally. Don't create this math, this, I delegate my vote so this other guy votes for. It's much simpler if you just do it. The amount of people vote, the majority wins. Yeah. And to me, that's the one change that needs to happen here already yesterday.
But really, that's in our Constitution.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's
so it's like
what kind of math is that? That's slave math.
No, honestly, that's what it was, right? When it was created,
They can continue.
In the same way that the Pinochet Constitution was sort of written by people who benefited from the Pinochet regime, the U.S. Constitution 230 years ago was written by 55 white guys who
the majority owned slaves,
were wealthy, who were educated. I don't know, it's like 0.001% of Americans at the time had any sort of like higher education. And they saw that if they didn't write in things in the Constitution that would help, that would actually like take the demos in democracy sort of away from the levers of power, then that they would lose out in the end, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting that at least in American sort of history and the way we think about that period, it's framed as like this tyranny of the majority and checks and balances, and they were such geniuses for building this system where like the majority doesn't have a say. And I've always said, like, why? It's very clear to me what that is, right? It's very clear to me that these were 55 men who knew that they had to create a system that cemented their power and their class interests. Mm-hmm. So it seems to me that we now live in a country that is just wildly different in every shape, way, and form from the type of country that they wanted to create. And I'm not one of these people that is like, let's throw out the entire US Constitution. Like, I think it's a pretty amazing document, right? Like in terms of like the things it spells out and the rights that it grants, but who does it grant them to, right? And who, when it was created, who were the intended recipients of these rights, right?
Two things I want to say. One is that this math, what happens, the effects is that it only breeds apathy, because the majority of New Yorkers here are like, right, it doesn't matter. Who cares about my vote?
And it counts as a fraction of a value of a vote as somebody in like North Dakota.
Exactly.
Right?
And the other thing is that now, if you ask me what document I cherish most, I actually cherish most the Declaration of Human Rights than the U.S. Constitution, especially speaking as a dual national, as a dual citizen. Mm-hmm. To me, that it's much more important. It's a moment where let's go back to a moment. In that moment, we realize that as humanity, we have the complete power to self-destruct. We had just dropped a nuclear bomb for the first time, like like serious problem, right? We're just examining, like after World War II, you know, we're examining ourselves, and we come together, create the UN. I mean, whatever you want to criticize it, but let's keep it in the bare,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
bare minimum. People came together and they wrote this, and to me, that should be considered center. The Declaration of Human Rights, where all these countries got together and they wrote it and decided on it. And I have more respect for that than for the U.S. Constitution, really.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just wanted to point
No,
that.
that's
And in the Declaration of Human Rights, it's spelled out that to we need housing to exist.
yes.
It is
Right.
a big thing. It's not something that you like put it in the market to be traded as commodity. No, you know, because what happened when you put it in the market and trade it as commodity, you end up with luxury skyscrapers empty and no housing for the people, right?
That's right. That's right.
So
Yeah.
all those things are spelled out. So basically what's been happening is that the perception and the right has moved the perception of the center to the right, like, and they like Bernie is the left, is radical left. No, Bernie is the center.
Yeah.
The Declaration of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is the center. That is the center. We decided that when we like fucked ourselves really bad.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And we decided that not as just the US, but in an unthinkable moment of humbleness with like 150 more other countries, you know?
Yeah. And you know, it's important to consider that as not just I think too often it gets chalked up to just like, oh, things trended this. There was a concerted political project to move things to the right, right? And what we see now in this country with like culminating in like Amy Coney Barrett being confirmed and cementing a conservative majority in another anti-majoritarian institution that's created by the Constitution, exactly. Right? But this is a political project from the right, the right-wing political project since the New Deal to try to dismantle social democracy in America and export that to countries like Chile, right? Like the neoliberal sort of economy of Chile that was sort of like came to fruition under Pinochet. He was getting advice from like Milton Friedman and like the Chicago School, right? It's all interconnected into this sort of like global project to pull economics and by virtue of that people's lives into this sort of free market ideology, right? So
can I just say something also?
Yeah.
There was this, why people vote for this too. I have to say there's this notion that of progress and freedom of enterprise, and a lot of people bought into that. But lately, we've seen all these scandals, the Panama Papers, all the secret bank accounts that Pinochet had abroad. So there was a lot of people that were like in this kind of like, ¿cómo se dice? Arribista, this attitude, this competitive mentality,
revisionist, you know, yeah, just like
they were like that was why they would support these things. Now when they're seeing that, oh, all those guys actually, it wasn't free market that was making them rich. It was like they're really like they were stealing all the money and putting in secret bank accounts. So I think that also has favored people kind of like just getting pissed off and really opening their eyes, you know. Same thing, for example, with the repression of the Mapuches, for example. Right now in Chile, there's been all this destapes, you know, of like montajes. How do you say montajes in English? Like covert operations, you know, to incriminate people, like complete fake things, like invent like Mapuche is kind of like burning a forest or something like that, and put fake proofs, you know, like really like engineered fake things, you know. The right wing has been doing it, Pinochet every day, you know, but but because now we have like I mean, like Black Lives Matter now showing with the phone what's happening, there's more proof of all this like tricking, you know. So that's why also like you have 80% of the people like now pissed off. Before it was more easy to control the truth, you know.
Mm.
but everything is relative too, because now with like social media, the movement of
Now,
lies is just
yes,
bigger,
extremely
and because
fast.
people
Yeah.
are uneducated, they just buy into the lies
Well,
so
and what we
easily.
have now is kind of like a schismed reality, right? Where
Yeah,
I think part of what you're getting at when you say like, let's just divorce the US is that like, we live in two different realities. We
yeah,
just do. And,
yeah.
like, I think uh, when, do you remember like right at the beginning of the Trump administration, when Kellyanne Conway said like, oh, something like alternative facts, and
Famous.
everyone laughed, but she was right. She's absolutely right. There are two realities
Yeah.
in and that's what makes the idea of 80% of of the country agreeing to do anything, it just seems so insurmountable
Mm.
right now, and I don't know how we navigate that going forward, even if Trump loses, like it's tough. It's tough to see a way forward, and I'm a little bit jealous that Chile gets a chance to start over. So, well, thank you so much for talking with me. I learned a lot.
Oh, thank you for being interested in this and inviting me to
Yeah,
talk. I'm not.
definitely.
I'm just a regular person. I don't have much
That's
knowledge.
why that's why I called you.
I mean, we're just citizens trying to understand these documents, trying to understand the way we're being tricked is very difficult. I experienced this,
Mm,
for example, in New York. We're fighting against the real estate industry, which does whatever they want. They
right.
have like the connection to a city planning commission to rewrite the zoning laws, So it's very difficult for us, that to kind of like educate ourselves to understand how the law works, to
Yes.
see how they're fucking us up, to see how. So what I can say is like union make the strength. Like we need numbers, you need communities, and you need leader group yourselves and take action. Like for example, yesterday, I'd be terrified facing the Police Benevolent Association by myself over there.
Mm,
It's like
hmm.
terrifying, but we were 150. We did it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
organize
Strength
yourself.
in numbers, big deal. It's a big
Start
deal.
small, doesn't matter. Start small. Start with your little assembly. Start with your choir. Start with your church. Whatever it is, start and commit. And show
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
And also, like and also vote all the time. Vote because yeah, you have to do it. That is the moment in which we connect with the whole
Right.
entity
That
of
moment of
yeah.
yes. Yeah. I think
So
that's the way you phrased that was really
exactly.
inspired me. I was like, oh God, I have to vote for Joe Biden. But yes, this like the
Yes.
the broader the broader
Yeah,
implications
you
of
go
what I'm
vote for
doing.
Joe Biden and you become the opposition and
That's
criticism.
right. Immediately afterward.
Exactly. I feel that's what we didn't do with Obama. We're like, poor Obama, we
Absolutely.
abandoned him. And the other
Yes.
thing is like,
Well, he abandoned it went both ways. Yeah.
it went both ways. But also remember, like in this country at least, even if you put the best president, if he doesn't have the support of the Senate, we can do
Correct.
nothing. You're
Yep.
tied hands. You can do nothing. You're
Yep.
going to end 4 years fighting for Obamacare and you're going to end up with like
A
nothing.
really
So
crappy version of it.
So
Yeah.
please get involved at every level. Local level, very important. And
And then all the way up.
it's nice.
Thank you. Love you very much.
Thank
We'll
you.
talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye, Danny.
Okay. Bye. Mwah.